Okay, I want to show you the stages that I go through when I'm propagating my plants. This changes a little bit for me each year, and I like to update the information just to show you what works best for me and just what I'm looking at when I go through this process of propagating. One of the hardest things, I guess, sometimes to communicate is just the stages that you have to take the cuttings through to get them to where you want them. You have to work with them. A lot of times people, they lose track of it during one of the stages and they end up losing all their progress. But first and foremost, the season sets the context for a lot of things. Right now we're in the middle of winter and we get a lot of hardwood cuttings. Greener stuff can sometimes be hard to do just depending on what you're working with. Everything's different, but this is just an outline of how to think about your propagation. So first of all, here we have freshly taken cuttings, and these are pear cuttings. I think these are Bosc pear cuttings, and they're notoriously hard to do. One of the reasons they're hard to do is because of how long it takes for these to root. Sometimes the cuttings end up sitting in soil a little bit longer than than what you would like, and you end up getting rot and all this type of thing. So I'm going to share with you a way that I try to get around that. Because you take a cutting like this, it's going to take a while for it to wake up and want to put out roots. I'm going to show you what I do to avoid having it sit in soil. So these days what I like to do is use bags. And I like to do this for a long time, but I've got a good explanation for why you'd want to do this. Because the bags give you a way to observe the cuttings, and really there's three things I like to look for. The cuttings will develop in these bags, and as you can see, the foliage is coming out on these mulberry cuttings, so that to me is a prime indicator that they need to come out. So these are going to come out today, and they're going to go into cups kind of like this. You see how I've made a little miniature greenhouse. And all these are just windowsill plants. I'm not doing anything really outdoors. It's wintertime. I don't want to have to be bringing plants in and out. So I'm going to cut away here and take these out and just show you what they look like. But three things that you're looking for is you're going to be looking for callousing, you're going to be looking for root formation, and leaves. Like I said, when those leaves come out, you're going to want to start to put them in something like this and set them on the windowsill. Let me take these out of the bags and I'll show you the callousing of these cuttings, which is real important to look for. If you'll notice these tips here, that's where you usually lose the cutting. They'll rot on these tips. Like something like this hasn't calloused yet, so I'm going to show you what a callus looks for. That way, if you have something like this in bags, you'll know what to look for. So it keeps the cutting from rotting on the end, and it's also kind of a pre-indicator that roots are about to come out. So let me show you these mulberries right quick. Okay, if you'll notice, none of these have really developed any types of roots, but sometimes you can actually get the cuttings just depending on temperature conditions, and just there's all kind of little variables that can make the roots come out before the leaves or whatever, just the time of the year that you take the cuttings. But none of these have roots, and that's fine, because that's not really the main thing that I'm wanting to do. Is I'm wanting to shorten the time that these cuttings are in soil and give them a chance to callus. And from a plant hormone perspective, one thing I've learned is that when you see these leaf nodes start to break out, a lot of times that means the cutting wants to start putting out roots. So you're shortening the time in between when these are cut and put in soil, which is pretty big, because a lot of times you could just take them and put them in something like this, but you can't really observe what's going on with the cutting. You can't tell if there's too much moisture or if it's rotting. As you can see, none of these are rotting on the end. Now there is a little bit of dampness that's accumulated on the cuttings, which is kind of, it's not ideal, but you don't want to put too much moisture in your bag. You don't want water pooling. As you can see, there's some condensation. These are kind of damp because I had them near the heater vent for a little bit too long. But so you want to keep them in bags so you can watch for the cutting developed, and that way you can shorten the time between when these are cut and when they go into soil, and you can have the humidity conditions just perfectly inside the bag. Whereas with the cups, it's a little bit hard. Like if I pick up on that, it's a little heavy, and a lot of times that's how you lose these cuttings, is they get to this area gets too damp. And it's good to, you know, these don't have roots. You know, I just put this one, this comes from the same batch of cuttings as these, but you know, with this on, with the cup on, usually, you know, you won't have to water it but just once, but you want to let that cutting dry out. And the cuttings themselves don't really like to have a lot of dampness on their leaves, so from time to time you can come around and take them off. But by the time you see that, you can see these you know, roots starting to form. This is a different batch of Shangri-La, but it's gone through the same process. Once you start seeing some root formation, it could be anything, you can go ahead and take the cup off. A lot of times the foliage will outgrow the cup, which, you know, that's kind of inconvenient sometimes, but you can just leave it on there. By the time it starts outgrowing the cup, though, you're getting close to being able to take it off anyway. You don't want to give them too much sunlight. I got these on windowsills, so they're either getting a little bit of afternoon or morning sunlight. And so once you start seeing the roots, you can take the cup off. Now you see these were taken from the same batch. These are Shangri-La, and you can see how that one's been potted up. And that's the next stage right there. Is I like to just keep developing, especially over winter. Like a lot of times, what you're going to do with the plants determines how you're going to work with them. You can take shortcuts. A lot of times, you know, people just they don't have time to go through all these little things. But these are plants that I really want. I really want these in the ground. I really want them to develop over winter so I can get them in the ground right after the first frost and have them into some spots. But you can see kind of the progress you go through here with the cutting developed. So yeah, that's the main thing. Now these will all be potted up today. These are going to go into bags. Now, for instance, with peach or nectarine or some of these other, there's some cuttings that are hard to do, but they can be rooted. They're hard because they root slowly and they sit in soil for too long, and you lose them a lot of times from just root rot and this type of thing by not keeping the moisture regulated. But with these, what I'll do is put them in bags. You can see these nodes. These will probably stay in bags for a while, but once the leaves start coming out, by that time you're going to start seeing some pretty good callousing, which you want. That'll keep, like I said, that'll keep the cutting from rotting, and it kind of gives you an indicator that roots are about to set, because they kind of go together. The callousing and the roots kind of go together. So these will stay in bags, and these leaf nodes will start to break after, you know, probably after a month or so. It just depends the stage of the cutting, but you know, get them in the soil. Do them similar to walk them through the similar stages here, and that'll shorten the time that they're in soil, which is pretty big. That's going to increase your odds of success. The longer they sit in soil, the worse. Now, some things are just quick to root, like these World Best. They root pretty quick. Shangri-La are very slow to root, but as you can see, I rooted them through the same process. I've got some Pakistan Long, which are slow to root inside, and the slower rooting stuff can sometimes it can be a problem. The quicker rooting stuff, a lot of times you can skip steps. You know, during the winter, say like for elderberry cuttings, you wouldn't even have to necessarily use a cup sometimes if you just take them through this bag step. But that's it. That's what I wanted to share with you. And the main takeaway is to let your cuttings callus and leaf out, get them closer to where their cutting is waking up, and shorten that time in the soil to increase your odds of success. You know, you can observe the cutting. You can let the cuttings dry out if they seem too damp. You can spray a little bit of water in there if it's getting too dry. You're not going to have a lot of moisture loss in the bags, and you can see just perfectly. You can work with them. Like I said, some things will distribute or display roots before anything. Sometimes the foliage will come out. If you start getting foliage like this, it's a good indicator that you want to start to look at taking them out, because this foliage will get kind of damp, and it'll start to get mushy and moldy and that kind of thing. So that's what you want to avoid. But another big tip and another big point is that when you do see these leaves, somebody that's really good at this one time, I bought these cuttings from, mentioned this to me, that when you see the leaves come out, that's when you know that the cutting is wanting to hormonally wake up and set roots. So that's real important to think about. That's real important to remember. Season's going to determine a lot. Stage of cutting is going to determine a lot. When it warms up a little bit, we'll talk more about the greener stuff and how to work with it. But it's just a lot of variables. But this is just a basic guideline for the stages and a few tips and tricks to consider while you're doing it.